right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And that is a tall order today because we are talking about the new film from Ari Aster, Beau Is Afraid, starring Joaquin Phoenix as poor Beau going on an anxiety-riddled journey to go see his mother. It's a wild one. And joining me to talk about it is Matt Davis from Shall I Stream It? We got a great conversation, lots of great puzzle pieces to talk about, and try to figure this movie out. But before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You could, of course, find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or wherever you're listening right now. Just hit that subscribe or follow button, whatever the button says. Just hit that. And while you're at it, maybe drop a 5-star rating and review if you like what we do here on Piecing It Together. You can also follow me on social media at PiecingPod. I'm on Twitter. I've been more active on Instagram lately, so check out the Instagram. And check out our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. Last but not least, I do want to let you know about our Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. I've got a couple of bonus albums that are going to be going up there very soon. Also, we just recorded a new exclusive Awesome Movie Year episode for the Patreon that'll be going up any day now when this goes up, or might already be out by the time this goes up. But regardless, there's lots of great bonus and advanced content. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. If you want to support the show that way, I really do appreciate it. And with that said, let's talk about Beau Is Afraid. All right, we are going to attempt to talk about Beau Is Afraid. This is going to be a weird one. And joining me is Matt Davis from Shall I Stream It? Matt, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, you sure picked a weird one to talk about. I think we knew that, though, going in, right, with an Ari Aster film.
Yeah, I picked a doozy, so I was expecting a weird movie, and a weird movie I received.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll get into it in a minute here, but it is your first time on the show. So tell my listeners a little about you and your site.
So I run a website and YouTube channel called Shall I Stream It? We do movie and TV reviews. We talk about streaming services in general. So whether you are looking to see what is coming out on streaming, to get some help with your grandma for using her Roku player, we cover all things related to streaming services. So we are on YouTube. Look up Shall I Stream It? You can go to shallistreamit.com. Look up Shall I Stream It on Twitter. We have a lot of cool things happening. Just added in some new writers. Got a guy who is a member of the Critics' Choice Association writing for us now. So I'm really excited. And cool things happening over at Shall I Stream It?
Right on. Yeah, I'm going to have to send my dad to your channel because I'm currently, I have to teach him how to do every single freaking thing. And it's getting to be much, but we'll talk about that maybe off mic a little bit. But before we start getting into puzzle pieces and stuff like that for Beau Is Afraid, I want to kind of like set the scene here for Ari Aster and his films. Like, were you a big fan of Midsommar and Hereditary?
Yeah, I was definitely a big fan of Hereditary and Midsommar, both of those. Hereditary in particular, I thought was a masterpiece of horror. For me, some people might think that Hereditary, like, I guess if you've seen like every Japanese horror film or independent horror film, it might be tame for you. But for me, it scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
And especially just the level of creepiness for me was the thing that really got to me. Just how it got under my skin and made my skin crawl with Toni Collette's performance, which I think was spectacular and one of the best performances I've seen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like, I think for a lot of us of like our like age range. Like we're all gonna just be like talking forever about that's like the big snub of like Academy history. It's like it's truly ridiculous. But yeah, talking about how creepy that movie is, and then Midsommar to a degree as well, even though it's more getting weirder versus scary, like definitely kind of tipping the scales. I think that's something we should talk about before we start on some puzzle pieces here. Were you aware of or prepared, or had you seen any talks with Ari Aster going into Beau Is Afraid, where he discussed how funny he thought this movie was, like how funny his intentions were in making this?
I did not.
Okay.
So one of the things that I try to do is before I see a film, I avoid the press.
Yeah.
So I'll watch the trailer, and for me, when I saw the trailer, I got kind of like Big Fish vibes for
Sure.
some reason.
Yeah.
I think just from the visuals. That is not the vibe I got leaving the theater.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I went into the film fairly blind.
Yeah, I think on our trailers episode, I think we might have brought up Big Fish actually, which definitely once you actually get to the real movie, I mean, you might still be able to make that comparison, but maybe not as much. But yeah, so we know of Ari Aster as this horror guy, and this movie, I feel like your enjoyment of it definitely is going to hinge on whether or not you're going in expecting the next big horror movie from Ari Aster versus where's this guy going to take me? And where he takes you is to a very anxious, insane, messy, but like very entertaining, at least I felt, like wild ride of a film. And so I think that's the place to start approaching this from. And I know that's going to play into a lot of my puzzle pieces along the way. But with that said, let's start getting to some puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first one?
Yeah, so for my first one, this is a film I thought about just not in terms of the style of it, but also in terms of how people have reacted to the film.
Mm-hmm.
Was Mother
Sure.
from Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
When I saw the reactions to Beau Is Afraid, which I tried to reserve mostly until after I had seen it, it made me think so much of how people responded to Mother. These were two films that just had a very polarized response from the audience. And I think in some ways, the negative response helped fuel interest in the film. At least it did for me in both cases.
Yeah.
But I saw it as a scenario where you had two directors that really had built a brand for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Darren Aronofsky, he, had more films under his belt, and it does seem like he probably had more films like Noah, where there was more studio involvement,
Sure.
than what Ari Aster had. But you had two directors where their names can be on a poster and people will go see that film because of that director.
Yeah.
And this was, it kind of felt like their opportunity to just go wild with something.
Yes.
And yeah, that's definitely the vibe that I got from both Mother and from Beau Is Afraid. Although I do, I would say that I think Mother has a more perhaps sympathetic portrayal of mothers.
Yeah, possibly. Depends on your reading of the film. I love Mother. It's one of my favorite movies, and yeah, I agree. Especially the first hour of Beau Is Afraid, and we'll get into like spoiler territory and everything with this conversation, and talk about like where things go. But that first hour of Beau literally just being afraid of everything and unable to leave his apartment, and just everything that is all of his fears and anxieties manifesting around his life, like all that stuff is, it kind of leaves you that same like jaw on the floor, like how are they not only doing this but like thinking of even trying to attempt this, and then the choreography of it all, the cinematography of it all, and like trying to continuously ramp up the crazy from beginning to end. Like it just goes in a way that Mother did for sure. I think also, and this speaks to exactly what I was just talking about before we got into puzzle pieces, both films kind of sold as a horror movie, which Mother isn't really a horror movie. Like it's bizarre and dark and weird, but it's not a horror film. And the same could be said for Beau Is Afraid. There's horrific moments in it, very nightmare-like, scenarios, but when it comes down to it, it's like a funny, anxious, weird film most of all. And so, two very different films in that sense, but both being, marketed as a horror movie to, go out to on a Friday night. I think mainstream audiences, it's kind of not a surprise they didn't connect with either of these two movies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When I went into Mother, it was an Aronofsky film, so I guess you don't totally know what to expect. But I did remember thinking, oh, it's a psychological drama, and I got a baby being ripped apart and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Oh, it's a great movie. I'll go to my first puzzle piece, which I had kind of told you in advance I would definitely be kicking it off with, and that is Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, which I think it's the big one. It's like you kind of got to get it out of the way. It's his opus. It's his like almost passion project kind of thing about this anxious man who's constantly in fear of dying, and he decides it's his life's mission to stage this play about all of human experience, and ends up in the process of trying to capture all that, creating this whole replica of his life within a playhouse, and things get very out of control and surreal. And I think that Kaufman's work hangs very much over Beau Is Afraid, and I think to a degree Midsommar as well. I think there was some Kaufman influence there as well, but just that insanely over the top, anxious feeling of the comedy and of the filmmaking in general. There's so many layers there that I think you can point to that include a lot of Jewish anxiety, like quite frankly, and I know that very well as a Jew. But I also think that, any kind of anxiety, whether it's the fear of his mother, the fear of sex, the fear of the outside world, the fear of people getting into your apartment, the spider that's in his apartment. Like there's so many things to be scared of. All that kind of like going together and building up into just this world of anxiety, and the way that Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in Synecdoche, New York, is just on edge from beginning to end, and the way that is making his world crumble around him. I think there's so many comparisons that could be drawn between the two.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I think the thing I told you earlier was I worked at a movie theater when that first came out, and
Hmm.
I will always associate it with people ordering tickets for a variety of pronunciations of that film.
Yeah. No one knew what to do with that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing, and I'm always excited when I can, ever since I started this podcast, like I'm always excited when I can see a movie and be like, "Oh, there's a little bit of Kaufman in there," because we don't get enough Charlie Kaufman, quite frankly. I mean, we just had, I'm thinking of Ending Things a couple years ago, but that was his first movie in I think 6, 7 years, and hopefully we'll get something again soon. But in the meantime, we've got Ari Asters out there. We've got Daniels out there doing things that are definitely in that kind of world. And so that's always exciting to see. But let's go to your next piece. What do you got next?
Yeah. So as for my next piece, this is a film I just kept thinking back to as I was watching it, and that is Joker.
Sure.
Both star Joaquin Phoenix, obviously, but both of these movies engaged with the subject of mental health, I
Hmm.
felt like, in really provocative ways. And I'm always really interested to see when actors have kind of a connective thread from one project to another. So for me, seeing Joaquin Phoenix, do a project with like Joker, where it caused so much discussion around mental health,
Yeah.
to then go and do another project where it's dealing with anxiety and dealing with a person who is, seeking help from a therapist. I found that part to be really interesting. And both of these films also alter your sense of reality based on not what is perhaps literally happening within this universe, but what
Sure.
is happening within those characters' minds.
Yeah, yeah. When you get to that kind of character, I mean, everything is going to be questionable. And yeah, both of these movies definitely deal with people who have been failed by the system, who have gone through so many different kinds of traumas, and whose stories are, really sad, like when you break it down, but then both approach them in very big movie kind of ways. So,
Yeah. I mean, Joker is perhaps a little more mainstream.
sure.
Don't really think Beau Is Afraid is going to reach the $1 billion club, but it could. You never know.
If it reaches the $35 million club, we can all celebrate. So,
Then we'll get Beau Is Afraid 2,
oh yeah,
co-starring Lady Gaga.
yes, let's do it. I'm down. I'll go to my next piece, and that is going to be Jim Carrey in The Truman Show. The feeling of a world that is just built around this one guy, and of course, in The Truman Show, Jim Carrey, eventually realizes that and begins to fight back against that. And Beau Is Afraid, poor Beau, it's really hard to say what he realizes and what he doesn't realize, and what has been built up around him and what hasn't, and is just kind of his imagination or his anxieties manifesting in a way. But it certainly feels like, strings are being pulled and his life is being manipulated in ways, and whether that's by his mother, by his psychiatrist, by just everybody else in his world, it's hard to say. But I think, both of these characters live in that world that doesn't quite feel real.
Yeah, I definitely got that feeling at the very end where he's in the kind of stadium and there's all those people watching. So yeah, it makes you as an audience member kind of question your own sense of reality too. Like, is this all a simulation?
Sure, absolutely, which it probably is. But let's go to your next piece.
Yeah, my next piece is The Tree of Life.
Sure.
This is another film that I think it had a divided reaction from general audiences. But for me, this was one of the first films that I really felt like I was able to step back and accept that it's okay if I'm sitting through a movie and I don't know everything that is going
Right.
on right
Yeah.
off the bat. And I feel like that's a thing in general with kind of film criticism in the film world. I feel like people are afraid to engage with certain films if they feel like they don't get it. And you don't have to get it. Like if you go to an art gallery, you're not going to be able to write a 50-page essay on a piece of artwork unless you have really like sat through that and you've engaged with it and you've talked with people about it and you've learned about the craft and behind it. So yeah, these were both films that went from kind of like sort of real life, drama to escalating to worlds that are very off the rails and going into very, artistic cerebral territory. So
Yeah.
yeah, I thought back to The Tree of Life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're really hitting on something that, like, really we need to talk about with a lot of movies nowadays, like, the rise of the ending explained videos and all that kind of stuff. Like when we had to just sit and think about a movie for the next year or two, and like you live with them and you never forget those movies because you've put so much thought and so much time into them. Now so many movies, everybody wants like the answer like by the time they go to bed that night, and then you forget about the movie a couple of weeks later, and like, it's really, that's the sign of a great movie, is when you can sit and chew on it for a while. Something like The Tree of Life, something like Beau Is Afraid, and it's a shame that people don't want to engage that way anymore, it seems like. So yeah, no, it's a really good point and a great movie to bring up as a piece here. Speaking of movies that I don't get right away when I saw them, and I don't know if I still get at all, but I'm going to go with The Wolf House for my next piece from 2018, which is an absolutely bizarre Chilean animated film, stop motion animation, which is really creepy and a perfect example of animation as something that's just, not just for kids, but so influential here that Ari Aster actually invited the directors to come work on the animated sequences of Beau Is Afraid. So I think it's a pretty, obvious and definite influence here. And the way that Beau is kind of breaking from reality and using stop motion to kind of show that in those sequences, I think We're seeing some really, really inventive stuff there, and stop motion is really having a moment. Like between the Wolf House from a couple years ago, and then last year we had Pinocchio, and we had The House on Netflix. We've been having a lot of Phil Tippett's Mad God. We've been getting a lot of really
Mhm.
cool stop motion lately, and that whole sequence in Beau Is Afraid really adds to this moment that stop motion has been having lately.
Yeah, and I guess I was a little bit taken aback from the trailers because I
Hmm.
felt like there was so much emphasis in the trailer on those sequences, but seeing how this was integrated into the film, I felt like was very effective. That you have this moment that is this imaginative sequence, and it was just very well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird too because and again, this speaks to Bo's mind state. That sequence going full on animated and it's so weird and everything, pretty much the same level of weird as anything that isn't animated. Like it's all just weird from beginning to end, everything that's going on, whether it's live action, animation, some mix between. It's all just broken from reality from beginning to end, the whole movie. So it fits in so well because it's always like that. But yeah, what do you have for your next piece?
Yeah, so for my next one, I know we did talk about this earlier, but it is the movie Hereditary.
Mm,
I kept thinking back to how both films deal with family trauma
sure.
and, specifically the subject of the mother. And, I'm not going to do a psychoanalysis on the director here, but it is just interesting to see that connective thread and to see those subjects explored. We also saw him explore that with a short film. I believe it was called There's Something About the Johnsons.
Yeah, I've never seen his short films. One of these days, I'm gonna have to sit down and marathon those.
Yeah, I remember I think it went kind of semi-viral on YouTube, like, in the early days of YouTube.
Mm,
I don't remember what okay, I guess it was 2011, so it wasn't that early.
okay.
But, yeah, I just remember there being so much discussion around that short film,
Yeah.
and I won't spoil anything about it. I don't know if you've, like, read the plotline or anything, but Um, both that and Hereditary deal with family trauma,
Yeah.
and it's I think a center of so much psychological drama and psychological horror. So it's an interesting thing to explore and engage with, and that's what I like about the horror genre. Even though this film, Beau Is Afraid, wasn't necessarily a horror film, is helps you it helps people deal with difficult subjects that I think you can't necessarily explore in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about Hereditary as well as a puzzle piece, and it's funny when I've seen this before, and I'm trying to remember other examples of it, but where it's so clear that like a director's previous film, either the title or the main theme of it or something was an inspiration on something they did later on. But we get to the sequence, towards the end of the movie where we find out about some of the things that his mom, may have said to him when he was young, and basically telling him that his grandfather died from sex, and that was what made his father, and then his father died from sex, which is what made him, and the psychological effects that would have on this poor kid, and I mean that literally is the title of Hereditary. Like that title could have applied to that story, that big reveal. So like it would have fit so perfectly as the title of this movie, but he already used it. So but yeah, so good piece there using Hereditary in this list. I'll go with the 40-Year-Old Virgin, the Judd Apatow film with Steve Carell for my next one. This kind of
Okay.
ties right back into what we were just talking about there with what poor Beau was told growing up, but just that anxiety and just being totally afraid from their entire life of sex. And of course the 40-Year-Old Virgin approaches it in a much different kind of movie, just a straight up comedy, a broad comedy. But it's a universal thing, I think, people's fear when they haven't had sex yet, and like of how it's going to change their life and what it's going to be like, and are they going to be good at it or whatever. And then of course when he finally does, just how awfully that goes. So that leads to like a big huge, like one of the key moments of the film, I think. And yeah, I mean, there's just so much anxiety around it that it's like it's a perfect thing to kind of build the whole movie around, and then for that to be such like almost it's kind of the big moment of the film, I think, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. You know. There was a big moment with some penis monster going on, and Beau Is Afraid. So that was
That's a
something.
big moment as well. So yeah. Yeah. Plus, we get Mariah Carey, so that also helps elevate things. So I'm sure there.
Yeah,
I can't remember the 40-year-old virgin. I'm sure there was some good pop songs in that one too.
yeah, that was one thing that really kind of I enjoyed with Beau Is Afraid was their music selection and how out of place and random it seemed, but
Yes.
also so fitting in a
Yeah.
way.
Absolutely. What do you got for your next one?
So my next one, just going with the subject of the kind of creepy mom, is Carrie.
Oh, sure.
Um, yeah, I think that to me is like the ultimate film about the kind of like deranged mother, and I think that's a really interesting subject to explore. I think in the horror genre and a variety of different mediums is seen that kind of like opposite of the motherly or nurturing figure, twisted into something kind of dark. And we saw that explored in Carrie. We've seen echoes of that in Beau Is Afraid. And yeah, I did kind of think back to that.
Yeah. I'm always wondering, like, first of all, great piece, but, second of all, on a little bit of a tangent, I'm always wondering when, like, Hollywood will put a horror movie out in September when, Halloween is just a month away. Mother's Day is coming up in a couple of weeks. Why didn't this movie come out on Mother's Day? Why didn't Evil Dead Rise come out on Mother's Day? Why didn't Mafia Mama come out on Mother's Day? We had all
Right.
these great mother-related movies in April. Like, we could have just done it in May. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be, maybe if you don't take your mom to a movie, you've got some mommy issues. This could be.
That's a good way to put it. So yeah, but yeah, no, that definitely like this is one of the creepy mom movies. So it definitely fits in there with bringing up Carrie. Um, I will go with let's see. I gotta get a couple more here. I'm gonna go with Freddy Got Fingered for my next puzzle piece here.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a lot of like weird stuff being thrown at the screen here, and I looked it up. Tom Green got $14 million to make whatever he could think of, which is not going to connect with most audiences. Although is an amazing movie, and I love Freddy Got Fingered, but it's a movie that like stood no chance. It wasn't going to make its money back. It wasn't going to connect with most mainstream audiences. It wasn't going to connect with critics. It was just going to be this weird vision, a filmmaker's passion project, a vision, them doing something that is just so personal and weird and unique to them. And that's kind of what Ari Aster got to do here with $35 million. And, thank you, A24, for letting him do it because not a lot of studios would. And, I don't think Beau Is Afraid is going to end up on my, like, favorite movies of the year list, even though I really liked it. But at the same time, I am always so happy when a studio lets someone with this kind of mind just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. uh, you know, Freddy Got Fingered. What that makes me think of is when A.O. Scott, I believe is his name, the New York Times critic,
Sure.
recently retired. I remember in his kind of like retrospective interview, he talked about how he gave that film a very positive review.
Yeah.
And,
he was on the right side of history, A.O. Scott.
I can't remember his exact quote, but it was something like, "This has high art potential," or I don't remember.
I completely agree. It does have high art potential.
I just find it funny that he's like retiring from the industry because Marvel movies are taking over, but he's like, Freddy Got Fingered. That was
Yeah. If
high
more
art.
movies were like Freddy Got Fingered, he'd stick around longer. What do you have for your next piece?
I guess it just off the top of my head, visually, I do feel like Big Fish. It feels like kind of a, similar reference, at least in terms of that animated sequence.
Sure.
That is something that I would see a connective tissue with.
Yeah, Absolutely. Well, I only have one more piece, and
Mhm.
mine would be more in general the work of Terry Gilliam. Could be, the Odyssey adventure aspect of it with like something like The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, or the weirdness and the humor of something like Fear and Loathing, or the mental illness of the Fisher King. Like, there's really a lot of his films that you could kind of connect here, and. I think again that's something that I could see in Midsommar as well. I think that even though Ari Aster keeps getting, lumped in as like this horror filmmaker, I think he's much more interested in a lot of other weirder kind of ideas within film. And while they'll always be maybe horror adjacent, it's certainly a lot of like nightmarish visuals. He's interested more in like kind of pushing what film could do and what it can be in a way as somebody like a Terry Gilliam has done.
Isn't Ari Aster? Didn't I read he's working on a musical as well?
I think so. As a Western musical, is that what it
Yeah.
is? Yeah. So I'm down. That's all I got to say. And Joaquin Phoenix is on that one as well. So I am absolutely
Hmm.
down for that. Yeah, let's read down the list of our finished puzzle here, and we'll get to some closing thoughts. But we talked about Mother, Synecdoche, New York, Joker, The Truman Show, The Tree of Life, The Wolf House, Hereditary, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Carrie, Freddy Got Fingered, Big Fish, and the work of Terry Gilliam. Lots of weird stuff in here, lots of interesting stuff. Any other closing thoughts that you had? Anything we didn't quite get to here?
I am still just recovering from that penis monster. So
Yeah. It's certainly a work of nightmares. Let's put it that way.
yeah, when that happened, I was like, "Whoa, okay,
Yeah.
this went off the rails in a way I wasn't expecting." So, it's a film I feel like I've got to watch a second time, a third time, really pick it apart and
Hmm.
see, all of the things I discover.
Yeah.
Maybe there's other penis monsters I missed.
Eh, Probably. I mean, it's a very dense film. There's a lot going on in every single like frame of every scene. I mean, we even like going through puzzle pieces. We didn't even talk about like some of the things that happen along Beau's journey. I mean, like his whole time with Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane, like living as their kind of adopted son, and all the weird shit at their house. Like, there's so much to the movie, and so many sequences, and so many steps along his journey. It really is like a journey type film, an Odyssey film. Um, the, yeah, it's there. There's a lot here to go through. And actually, I want to throw one more bonus puzzle piece in, even though we already listed out the finished puzzle. But Shiva Baby from a couple years ago,
Mm.
talk about Jewish anxiety, and also I liked at the when he finally makes it to his mom's house, and there's a truck out front, because he had just missed the funeral, the Shiva, and it's Shiva Steve's, which made me laugh. It was the name of the company that I guess threw the party for them. So yeah, a little bonus piece there, but yeah, like I said, it's just such a dense film. There's so much to it, and feel like I feel like if you were to kind of attack each individual sequence of the film, you could even find like probably another dozen puzzle pieces that we could talk about here.
Hmm. I know for me, just with some of the little details of the film, I'm someone I don't like spiders. So there's a moment pretty early in the film where they're in the hallway and you see a poster that's like warns about brown recluses
Yeah.
being in the building. And then I saw that and it made me think of the episode of Black Mirror
Mm.
where the guy goes into virtual reality and there's the giant spider and there being like references before that to spiders. Like there's a t-shirt that someone is wearing that has a picture of a spider.
Ugh.
And for me being an arachnophobic person that does not like to see that
Yeah.
always like sticks in my mind. And I'm like, oh, they're going to do something. There's going to be another spider. And there was.
I just as a quick tangent, but I was cleaning out my garage a few years ago, and there was a wine glass, and in the wine glass was a brown recluse spider, and who knows how long it had been out there. It had to be dead, right? No, it was alive and just sitting in the wine glass, and I can't even like look at any box or anything in my garage anymore. Like, it's just like there's gonna be a spider on every single fucking thing. It's just it's horrifying going out there, but. Ugh.
Just survived on the
Yeah.
leftover wine, I guess. Remnants of
Yeah,
wine.
drunk ass spider. Well, I think that does it for Beau Is Afraid. Is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Oh goodness, you mentioned Shiva Baby. At South by Southwest, I saw the movie Bottoms.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Yeah, that was quite funny. So once it comes out to theaters, I'm not really sure what their distribution plan is, but I definitely recommend that.
Nice. Yeah, very much looking forward to Bottoms. So great recommendation there. Matt, tell us again where they could find you and your site.
Yeah, you can go to shallistreamit.com or look up Shall I Stream It on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. So yeah.
Awesome.
Check it out.
Thank you so much for doing the show, and hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
Alrighty. I appreciate it, David.
Welcome to the podcast that wouldn't die. I'm your host, Kevin. With me, as always, is Aaron.
What up, what up?
Each week, we'll explore the classics of the horror and sci-fi genre with a little comedic twist.
We will ask those important questions like, why don't they get out of the haunted house the first time they see the ghost or the demon?
Why do people feel like, hey, there's been a spooky disappearance, but I'm going to investigate myself, even though I have no investigative background?
Or, why didn't I realize I was dead the whole time?
These important questions and many others we will get to the bottom of. So check us out each week at the podcast that wouldn't die.
Be there or be square.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Beau Is Afraid. Thanks to Matt Davis for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you enjoy piecing it together, make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you really like the show, maybe rate and review us. 5 stars would be awesome. And all those ratings and reviews helps get the show in front of new people. And that's what we're trying to do. So I do appreciate it if you do that. You can also, of course, share us. That helps too. And follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, if you want to join in the conversation. We have a lot of great movie-related conversations going on over there. Lots of fun people to talk movies with, so join us. You could also check out our Patreon. I told you about it at the top of the show, patreon.com/bydavidrosen. Lots of great content to check out from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and my music career. So, with that said, let's close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And I don't know. I don't have anything that sounds like Mariah Carey. So instead, I'm going to go weird. How about that? I'm going to go with a track called Everything and Nothing from my most recent album, More Content. I hope you enjoy this song, and we will be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.